with this man. As I was saying earlier, he has been on a tear this year. 70.3 wins, 13th at the Ironman World Championship. 14th. Was it 14th? I thought it was 13th. Oh, okay. I keep pushing you up one. 14th at the Ironman World Championship, but I know that number is going to be higher this year. I predict it's going to be higher. Now, we were together at the Mattamy Velodrome a month or so ago, about 2 months ago, and you were fine-tuning your position on the bike, and I know that was really important to you. It was something that was holding you back last year. How did that process go very quickly, and what has it meant to your performance?
Yeah, I was losing a lot of time, I think, on the bike. Like people are always saying, like, oh, your power meter must be broken or something because you're pushing power that would not translate into that speed. And so, but I was like, I've done like 10 different power meters and they've all said the same numbers. So that's when I finally said, I need to help. I need to get it like a professional to help me realize all the speed of the power. And so that's what I was doing that day that you saw that. And yeah, now I'm starting to, like at St. George, it's a very difficult course, has a lot of ascent. I pushed 352 watts and I went 43.5 kilometers an hour with, I think it was almost 2,000 feet of gain. So starting to realize the speed.
Wow, 43 kilometers an hour for over 90 kilometers and some tough kilometers too. And how's the swim coming along? Because I know, again, the swim, I don't mean to dwell on negatives, but the swim, the gap, it wasn't so much that you were swimming slower, but it was the gap. It was that multi-minute gap. You lose the psychological contact with the leaders. How's the swim coming along?
Before he answers that, he needs to put that a little closer. And he needs to speak
I'm not loud enough? All
there
right.
you go.
The swim, yes, has been quite the challenge. And after St. George, I came out with a 4.5 minute deficit yet again. And I said, enough is enough. It's obviously a technical issue that's happening. Like at 70.3 Worlds in 2014, I was literally last place out of the water. And yet I had the fastest bike run combination. So obviously it's not a system issue. And it's just taken me a ton of time to really say, okay, I'm going to take like 3 steps backwards in the hope of taking 4 steps forward. And so now after St. George, I canceled the 70.3. I was supposed to do Raleigh 70.3 last weekend, and I canceled it, and I said I'm just going to tear the stroke apart. So that's what I've been doing the last month, and it's really been that type of process where I've just went down to the foundational things. Like for me, I was swimming a catch-up stroke. I was swimming with a dropped elbow, entering very shallow with my hands, and then of course it drops the elbow, and then I was pulling very wide. And so those 3 things I've started to correct, and today I actually swam pretty good. I think it was only like 65 seconds behind the top guy, and he's a very, very good swimmer. So for me, just slowly starting to groove that good framework. It's moving in the right direction now, I think, truly.
Awesome. Let's take some questions from the crowd. I'll just, Lionel, if you want to just sit down on the bench there, if you want to ease the legs up a little bit, I'll just stride out here. And questions. Anyone have a question, a quick question for Lionel? Put your hand up and then shout it out to me. There's no question for a man who might win the Ironman World Championship? Yes, sir, right in front.
How much training prior to the last week?
Lionel, what's the training like in the last week? What's your last week look like before you do a big race?
Before I do a big race, or what was my last training like last week, literally? Both? Last week actually was the biggest week I've done so far this year. I was 13 hours on the bike, 140 kilometers of running, and about 30 kilometers of swimming. And I was pretty tired, to be honest with you, out in the race today, but that was to be expected. Leading into the race, I probably do a quarter of that. I still do, though. I did learn many years ago now that I prefer, higher volume just in general going into races and stuff. So leading into a 70.3 in the week of the race, I'll probably do about 20 kilometers of swimming, maybe 6 hours, 7 hours of biking, and 40 or 50 kilometers of running. And then the race itself would add to that.
Wow, that's a lot of training. Question right here, Luke.
Lionel, now that you've switched to Infinite, I'm just sort of curious what your long-distance strategy is for, like, are you going to go 100% Infinite in Kona? And if so, like, how are you going to carry all that calories? I'm not going to, like, carry 5 more. I'm curious what you're...
The question, thank you, Luke. The question for the audience, it is Lionel sponsored by Infinite for his nutrition, and the question from Luke Egots was, what are you going to do about nutrition for Hawaii and utilizing Infinite, your nutrition sponsor?
I'm not going to wear a Camelback on the bike, and I'm not going to carry 4 round bottles full of 750 milliliters of liquids, which added 12 pounds to my weight. But you know, I had a terrible experience at Ironman Texas in 2015, in which I was probably 10% dehydrated by the end of the race of my total body weight, and so I became like super anal about being fully hydrated at the end of the race. And that was, I think we've been blessed with bodies that you can be 5% or so dehydrated of your total body weight and still be performing decently well, at least at the end of an Ironman. So you have a bit of you know, buffer zone, and you should use it too, because there's some performance enhancing effect of being lighter on the run. So if you're, you know, let's say you come off the bike and 70.33% dehydrated, you're a few pounds lighter, so that's decent. So in Kona, because it's so hot and everything, it's basically just a game of figuring out what is my sweat rate going to be under those conditions, how much you know, in the power that I'll be pushing on the bike, how much will I lose per hour, and how can I come off the bike only 3% or so dehydrated, and figuring out what that number of consumption is. And so that's what I'll do. And then I've been able to actually dissolve all of an Ironman's worth of infinite nutrition into a 600 milliliter Aero frame bottle. And that's what I've been doing. It's like basically almost like a paste, pretty darn close. But as long as you practice with it a few times in training, I actually come to prefer it that way, because you're not constantly drinking super sweet stuff the whole duration. You take a few sips of your super concentrate, and then you're just drinking water most of the day on the bike anyway. So that is the strategy that I'll employ. And another thing I did in Kona as well is because they have the Pro Aid station, so I literally had a full 750 bottle at every basically 5 kilometers, and I won't do that again. Once again, I don't think, I was just far too anal about it. I'll do another super concentrate. I'll do 2 hand super concentrate bottles that will have 4 servings of infinite each time, which is good for a half marathon for me. And then I'll just have a second one at the halfway point, and I'll do super concentrate and water most of the way, and then maybe some Coca-Cola or something if I'm feeling the need for caffeine or something like that.
Thank you. Lots to think about. I'll come back to the questions in a sec. Just the results. We do apologize. There was some errors in the results in the first wave of the hard copy of results that they had posted up. The online results, if you go online, those are actually the correct results. Carolyn Moss, you had a question for Catalina. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was wondering how you stay motivated before a race when you know like you're going to be competing with like hard competition.
How do you stay motivated when you're competing against world-class competition, I think is the question from Catalina Moss.
I mean, that's the most for me, that is the most motivating situation to go up against, you know, like in St. George. I did St. George 70.3 about a month ago, and you know, Sebastian Kienle was there. He's won 70.3 worlds twice. He's won Kona. Michael Raylor was there. He's the world record holder for the 70.3 distance, has won the world championship twice. You'd have to go to a different planet to race against better guys at triathlon. And so how much more motivation do you want? It's just so, to even be in the same race and have the privilege to toe the line with these guys is fantastic, and just it's motivational in itself. I mean, I try, though, I will say in that regard, I try not to, you know, wrap my self-worth up and all that sort of thing in racing, because they really are the best guys. And I learned in that race, Kienle is a man to be feared. I put no time into him on the run, and I kind of thought I would be able to put time into him in the first 6 miles. We ran steady. In fact, he pulled time back from me. And so for me, I always try and maintain and cultivate the orientation to triathlon that I'm just here to do my best and to push myself to the absolute limit. And the only person who knows whether you did that is you. And so that's what I try to do. And at the end of the race, if I finished first or last or whatever, it doesn't matter, as long as I did what I set out to do, which is to push myself to the limit. So in St. George, I ended up winning the race, but it didn't matter. What I was most proud of when I crossed that finish line was that it didn't matter if I had finished 10th or 20th. I still would have been in the same mindset when I crossed that finish line, because I pushed myself to the absolute limit in that race. And that's what motivates me, not so much the competition, though it does help when Sebastian Kienle is running like 20 seconds behind you and you're trying not to get caught by him.
or that great battle you had with Jan Frodeno at Oceanside. I mean, I know you lost that one, but this man is battling it out with the absolute best triathletes in the world. Just one last question for me personally. How motivating the question was about motivation. How motivating is it from your own countrymen? I mean, Brent McMahon and Jeff Simons are literally world class as well. How do you sort of position yourself against those two, and how does that motivate you?
Well, Brent had an amazing performance 1 week ago in Brazil. He went 7 hours and 46 minutes for the Ironman, which is the third fastest time of all time. And I almost got on an airplane to the race this weekend in Australia because I wanted to go and race an Ironman now. That's how motivating it is to have, you know, I follow the Canadian guys probably more closely than anyone else. So, yeah, you know, I think it's one of those things, and as well with Cody Beals and who else am I racing against on that? Taylor Reed. I mean, it's like we all just want to like better each other, and you know, it's a friendly. We're all friends, and we're all at the races. It's very friendly, and we're all buddies. But you know, there certainly is that competitive. Like, I want to beat the best Canadians, and so I think it's one of those things, and we're experiencing it right now in the long distance side of things. Is we're only going to get better because Brent's doing this massive performance, and I want to go one up him somewhere else, and we're just doing that to each other each time, and I think it's great, and I think for years to come we're just going to get better and better.
Awesome, that's great. Thanks, Lionel. Appreciate your time, ladies and gentlemen. Lionel Sanders, awesomeness.